it is very important that you hold the violin upright, parallel to the floor, angled slightly to the right. Don't let it droop, because when you do that, it gets much more difficult to keep the bow in the sweet spot. Which brings me to the next thing: keep the bow in the sweet spot while you're bowing. The names of the open strings are G, D, A, and E. This week, we're going to learn how to play on the E string. The same principles that we learned last week in playing the G string also apply in playing on the E string. What I mean by that is when you play on the E string, it's important to keep your bow as close as possible to the A string without actually playing it, just like we did with the G string last week and this week during your practice. So this is about the optimal angle to bow the E string. You don't want to go too far out on this side, because then you're further away from the A string and it'll take just a little bit more time to get over to the A string when you need to get to it. Also, sometimes if you play too far over, you'll bow on the side of your violin, which isn't a big deal, but you'll just have to wipe the rosin off later. Don't bow too close to the A string. If you start hitting the A string by accident, adjust your bow so that it's in the correct place. As you hold and play the violin, your nose, the strings, your left elbow, and your left foot should be lined up on top of each other. In past lessons, I've said that a whole note takes up a whole measure, a half note takes up half a measure, and a quarter note takes up a quarter of a measure. I also need to add that that is only true when the time signature is 4/4, or common time. So in this particular exercise, and in most of the exercises we're going to do, the time signatures will stay at 4/4. To understand the time signature, you have to understand the top number and the bottom numbers and what they mean. The top number tells you how many. And what that means is how many beats per measure. So if the top number is ever 4, the top number tells you how many beats per measure. So if the top number is 4, you're always going to have 4 beats per measure, just like we do in all of our exercises and all of this exercise. The bottom number tells us how much. Top number is how many beats. Bottom number means how much. That just means what kind of note gets a beat. And this is a little more confusing. But for example, in 4/4, a quarter note, which looks like this, gets 1 beat. Hopefully you figured this out by now with practicing, and you've seen how the practice videos move on the beat and the quarter notes get 1 beat. As you practice, you'll be able to hear the beat because it's in a click on a metronome in the background of the video. This week is going to be the last week of practicing with just open strings. You might be bored of them by now, but I promise this is very important for creating a strong foundation for playing the violin well. The main things I want you to focus on as you practice this week is posture, holding the bow correctly, and staying in the sweet spot. Those 3, posture, holding the bow correctly, and playing in the sweet spot, are going to be the 3 fastest ways for you to succeed at playing the violin correctly. As you practice this week, a great idea before or after you watch your video is to practice in front of a mirror. If you have one of those full-length mirrors on a door or something like that, practice in front of that. That's a great way to check your posture to make sure the violin is up tall like it's supposed to be and your bow's in the sweet spot. Also, as you practice this week, either before or after you watch the practice video, practice moving your bow hold around. For example, you can move the bow with your whole hand like this to get more comfortable with this grip. Remember to keep your thumb bent all the time. You can, after you have a big motion with your arm, you can change it to a smaller motion with your wrist like this. So went from arm to wrist. And lastly, practice just moving your fingers like that. So we're moving from bigger motions to smaller motions to get yourself really comfortable with that bow grip. Besides going just up and down, you can also go clockwise, counterclockwise with the bow. These are all excellent exercises to get used to that bow grip. Throughout all of them, remember to keep your pinky on top of the bow. As you practice this week, this is going to be the last week we spend with our left hand on the body of the violin. So make sure that you are not holding the violin up from your left hand. Next week, when we start using fingers of the left hand on the fingerboard of the violin, you're not going to have hardly any support from your left hand. So practice holding the instrument up just like this, in between your chin and your shoulder, so it's about parallel to the floor. This week as you practice using down bows and up bows in your music. A down bow is signified in music with this symbol. An up bow is signified in music with this symbol. A down bow looks like this. It starts down at the frog or just anywhere lower in the bow, and you go down like this. So an up bow would just be the opposite, where you bow like that. You can use down bows or up bows wherever you want on this exercise because I haven't actually marked any of them. You might start one time with a down bow on the first note and play all the way through the exercise starting on the down bow. So it'd be down bow, down, up. And then maybe next time start on an up bow and see how that feels different. Keep all these things in mind as you practice this week.